Hello everybody, Justin here for another list video. Today I'm going to be talking about what I think are the 5 best designed enemies for all of Arkham Horror, the card game. We've done a list like this previously. They were like our favorite enemies, best designed enemies, but it's been a while, so I thought I'd love to revisit it and share some of my thoughts with some enemies that are new on this list and some enemies that were probably on the old list as well. One thing I want to cover first before we dive in and actually start figuring out what my top 5 is, we need to talk about what makes a good enemy. There's a lot of enemies in Arkham Horror, the card game. There are some that are easy, some that are designed to be tutorial enemies, some that are designed to be like challenging and over the top, some that are meant to be just like unique to that scenario. So there's a lot of factors that comes in with the design of an enemy. And for me, what makes the enemy design the best is a few things. The first one is threatening. Always threatening. So it's one of those things where they may not be an enemy that's going to kill you immediately the turn it comes out or when it attacks you, but it's always representing a constant threat on the board. A good thing that gives you kind of an idea what it means to be a threat is if it's an enemy that you'll tech for. Teching means that you're going to choose cards that you want to bring into the campaign to specifically beat that enemy or control that enemy. And this is a factor that I think is very huge for when it comes into defining a perfect enemy for me. One that is threatening so much that it kind of alters your game plan around it. Another thing is that it needs to represent something that is constantly there. This is kind of close to threatening, but in a different way. Where threatening means something that you need to solve the problem eventually. You can't just ignore it. You can't just like stop it and be like, hey, that's enough of you. You're just going to sit in this corner and we're not going to think about you anymore. So like enemies without hunter is like a good example of this, or enemies that don't would place doom on themselves is an example of something that is threatening, or an enemy that will chase you around and cause problems later down the road in a scenario. That's a big part of the enemy design for me. Another thing I think is that the enemy needs to be clean in its design. It needs to be something that just makes sense and works really well. A good example of this is I think that as a whole, the enemies from The Longest Night, from Feast of Hemlock Vale, are well-designed enemies, but I don't think their designs are necessarily clean. I think a lot of their designs carry a lot of baggage that comes from The Longest Night. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. They work that way to have the scenario be the way that the scenario is. But they don't really fall into my personal list of the best designed enemies because they're carrying all of that extra weight that makes their designs ultimately a little bit less clean than I would love from my top 5 enemy designs. So we're looking at threatening, we're looking at ever-present, and we are looking at clean design. While all of these aren't going to hit all of those perfectly, there are going to be factors that are going to carry through on all of them for what I think are the 5 best designed enemies. The other thing I think for me that makes an enemy design the best is the enemy just has to be something that when you draw, you're like, ooh, that's a little bit bad right now, but I think we can manage it, or we can find time to manage it eventually. So like, another thing is like an enemy that doesn't just like, is not just like a stat wall, you know, like it needs to have like factors to it that make it actually beatable, but they carry a lot of like, they carry a lot of weight even if they are beatable, but they're not just like, oh, well, this guy we can't beat. Like an example of this is the Mindless Dancers from the Circle Undone. I think they're, again, well-designed enemies, but the design of them is just that they're big, you know, and I don't think that's really as interesting as some of these other designs that we're going to be talking about in this video. And I think that's enough of an opening spiel. I think we should get to these 5 best designed enemies, and let's start with our first one here, which is Wizard of the Order. That's right, we're going back to a classic from the core set. This guy is still used today, and he's still just as impactful. The other enemy from this set is the Acolyte, which is also, I think, a very well-designed enemy. But I'm going to give Wizard of the Order an edge just on a little bit more. So, stat line, 4 fight, 2 health, 2 evade. He's a humanoid cultist, spawn at any empty location. He has retaliate, which is a nice little thing to have added on him. But the real meat and potatoes of this guy is at the end of the Mythos phase, we place 1 Doom on the Wizard of the Order. So going back to the things that I think are very important for, in my mind, what is the best designed enemies. This guy is clean as hell. He has 3 lines of text, and one of them is retaliate, and one of them is spawn, and the other one is just his forced effects. So, like, it's very easy to understand what this guy is going to do, and the threat that he represents to the board. He also hits that second factor here, which is the idea of if you don't get rid of him, he is going to become a problem. Unlike the Acolytes, you can kind of just set and forget and be like, okay, that guy has a Doom on him, we can deal with him eventually, right? We can deal with him eventually or until, like, the Cultist gets more Doom on it, right? But this guy says, hey, brother, you gotta get here now and solve me, or I'm basically gonna be having your Doom counter, because I'm gonna be here every turn just making sure that I make the bad stuff happen, right? And I think that is a design that is very good for the game. It's obviously why, like, the Cultist, the Dark Cult set is still used today, because it is just, like, that well made. But I think that this guy is kind of like the linchpin of that set to just make the whole thing be as scary as it is. There's a reason why most of the time people just grab the Acolyte when the search for a cultist card comes up, because this guy is scarier, but if you have the time and space to deal with him, you grab that card then. I think that this guy doesn't really fit into the teching thing that I talked about earlier, but I think the fact that just his design is so clean, and his his like growing threat level, so like the stickiness of him, I guess that's the good word for it. Threat, stickiness, and clean. And this guy is both sticky and clean, which makes me feel a little bit disgusted to say in the same sentence. Just the whole sticky, I don't know if it's the right one, but we're going to go with it for this video. He is just he's always there, and he's demanding an answer immediately. So I think that he could also fall into the threatening thing, you know, because he is still just doing the Doom count, but I think it's going to be a different level of threatening that we're going to be talking about later on in this thing, because you don't really tech against him. Let's go to our next card here, which is Hunting Nightgaunt, another one from the core set, and this one I think is here mostly because I think the design is stupendous. This guy's a 3/4/1, a monster Nightgaunt. He's a hunter. While attempting to evade the Hunting Nightgaunt, double the negative modifier of each revealed chaos token. Now you might be thinking, this guy, really? He's not that scary, except honestly, he actually is pretty scary. He falls perfectly into that space that I talked about, where it's not, for example, a ghoul, where you can just, like, kill it in one attack. It's not a mindless dancer, where you're like, okay, we're just going to try to ignore that guy as much as possible. The Hunting Nightgaunt lives perfectly in that slice in the middle, where he is both easy and hard. And God forbid if you draw 2 of them in the same Mythos phase, there's going to be a problem. It's actually kind of funny. The big reason why Hunting Nightgaunt has made this list is because I think that ultimately this guy has gotten stronger over time. And I don't know if that happens with a lot of enemies that we've seen in this game, because melee options and like firearm options and just spell options and fighting options have gotten better as the game has gone. But another thing that has happened as the game has evolved is that ultimately evading has gotten better as well, right? So we are spending now more time doing builds where we are doing evasion. And suddenly the Hunting Nightgaunt is a lot more relevant than other enemies. Because as evade has become more popular and functional to run in a lot of decks, Hunting Nightgaunt now is saying, hey, that line of text that for the longest time you guys just ignored because you macheted me to death is now relevant, and Hunting Nightgaunt is like, baby, it's time to fight with this part of the card that you very rarely interacted with before. And I think that it's one of those things where it's become at least more noticeable to me the bigger impact that hunting Nightgaunt is having on my games of Arkham with patrons, with Travis and Bryn. We were just recording last week, and a hunting Nightgaunt was a big roadblock for us. We were like, okay, how do we solve this problem? This guy he's not, again, not going to cause us to lose the scenario, but he's providing such a hindrance that we don't really have a good way of beating him, because Bryn, again, was playing someone who was just, due to the separation of 3 players, he was like, I've been evading enemies, but this enemy I can't evade. And this is why I think that Nightgaunt here, he is one of the best designed enemies, because he is just so sleek, so clean, and he just functions really well at being a good check for difficulty while not being overbearingly difficult or punishing. 3-4-1 seems like a fair stat line, but really this guy's like a 3-4-3 most of the time, like when you balance it out, just do the doubling of the negatives. In standard, your -2s are now -4s, so you kind of have to want to get to 5 to have like a comfortable chance to evade this guy, but now even like a -3 causes you to fail. But killing him is just easy, but it is going to require 2 shots, and if there's a lot of enemies already on the board, a hunting Nightgaunt at the wrong time can really cause stress on the team. And I think that's why this guy is so elegant, because otherwise he's completely fair. So this guy mostly made it here because he's just so clean. He doesn't really fall into the sticky or threatening, because I'm not really trying to tech for this guy. And while he does have Hunter, I think that's just like, it's on the same level of stickiness as some of the other evade enemies that you just evade and have Hunter. Like, that's kind of the same thing there. But this guy, Hunting Nightgaunt, is an easy one in my top 5 best designed enemies. And let's go on now to number 3. With Brotherhood Cultist from the Forgotten Age. This guy's a 2/3/2, but is he really? He's a humanoid cultist with Hunter. Brotherhood Cultist gets +1 fight and +1 evade for each doom on it. Forced, when you initiate an attack against Brotherhood Cultist, place 1 doom on Brotherhood Cultist. This guy is the number 1 guy that you hate to see an autofail on. Well, actually, technically, he's the number 2 guy. There's a certain elite enemy in the Forgotten Age that is the number 1 guy you don't like seeing the autofail on, but this guy is, like, up there. I know some people might think that this guy is unfair, and I did for the longest time, too. He was just, like, such a big challenge, and it was just an absolute nightmare. He's gotten easier to deal with as we've gotten more cards, but I do think that this guy lives in all 3 zones that I previously talked about. And I think that the next 3 on this list are also going to be living in this zone of all the ones that we've talked about. So, Brotherhood Cultist, +1 fight, +1 evade for each doom on it. There are ways that you can get doom on it besides this, but the biggest way that he gets doom is whenever you initiate an attack against him, you place 1 doom on him. This guy is threatening. This guy is sticky, because it's one of those things where you need to decide the turn to kill him, because if you don't kill him or you draw him at the wrong time, suddenly attacking this guy and not killing him could be the difference between having 2 rounds to play this agenda or having 0 rounds left to play this current agenda. So it's one of those things where you need to have the right sort of attempt to how you balance this. And also, this guy is super techable. I remember when Scarlet Keys came out, I'm pretty sure it was Scarlet Keys, where String of Curses was revealed, and everyone was like, take that, Brotherhood Cultist, it's time for you to frickin' die. You've been a thorn in our sides for too long, and now we have another tool to just eliminate you. Spectral Razor was also a very big tool for killing these Brotherhood Cultists. There was a lot of ways that we teched for them. People brought handcuffs to just lock this guy in handcuffs and be like, all right, that's it for you. We're not dealing with this guy anymore. The thing that I like about him for being sticky is, again, that, like, if you do try to just, like, you can't really leave him in a corner. If you do lock him down but don't lock his doom, he is going to become a problem down the road. And he is super techable, and I think the design is incredibly clean. This guy is the 2nd scariest enemy in the Forgotten Age, and there's like an ancient one in there. This guy is one of the things that you remember most from your plays, and especially repeated plays, because he is just a good way to go from a strong position in Arkham to a bad position. And I think he only guaranteed to show up in 2 scenarios in the campaign. He can potentially show up in 3, I believe, which just goes to show the impact that this very unassuming character has and what it can bring to the table when he shows up. Because realistically, this guy is actually like a 3/3/2. Because as soon as you fight him, he's going to get 1 doom on him. Such a spooky card, and I think that his design is just absolutely stellar. And I think he's a nice, challenging enemy, while also not just being like ridiculous. I think that he can feel ridiculous, but I don't think he is ridiculous. I think that's just the luck factor of Arkham sometimes causing a little bit of a hiccup because you might have drawn the autofail token. Alright, let's keep this going with our next one here with everybody's favorite, the Whipperwill! Yay! From Dunwich, and they also have a little cameo appearance in the Circle Undone. Whipperwills, 2/1/4 creature, aloof, and hunter. Each investigator at Whipperwill's location gets -1 brain, -1 book, -1 fist, and -1 foot, and they deal 1 horror. This guy has long been touted at playing board games as one of the best designed enemies ever made, and I think that he is still one of the best. Consider this top 5 not necessarily in any order. These are just like the order that I thought of them, so just keep that in mind. There's no actual, like, this guy's not getting usurped by number 1. He's not getting kicked out of the throne. He is still just in the top 5, and it's all kind of just like a blob of top 5. But this guy is hitting all 3 on my personal rating for the 5 best designed enemies. He is sticky, and he is threatening, and he is clean for all the designs. So the reason he's sticky is because if you ignore him, he is going to constantly make himself a threat. He's going to always be there, and he's going to always be just rearing his ugly little whippoorwill head and singing his song of death to remind you, you should have killed me when you had the chance, you idiot, because now I got my brother here and you have -2 to all your stats, and suddenly I am not a 2/1/4, I am a 4/1/6. Don't know why you'd ever want to evade me, but you know, I am still like that. And like suddenly there's a 3rd one, and now I'm a 5/1/7, right? So like it's insane what this guy can suddenly become. He is techable. A lot of people will tech cards to deal with this. We'll see stuff like dynamite to just like nuke everything out of location. Elaborate distraction. Yeah, elaborate distraction is the one from Hemlock that deals the damage, I believe. That one is, I think, a very impressive card for dealing with this guy, and these are what people bring. Ping damage as well, like Zoe Samaras with her cross, right? Like, these are things that people will notice. They'll have an easier time with this campaign if they weren't playing that investigator, right? Because they just have, like, a tool that's just able to just solve a whippoorwill. Storm of Spirits is another good example. This guy being aloof and just having a passive effect kind of just turns him into a treachery. And I think that this is a design that I would love to see more of for enemies, where they're just kind of vibing at your location, but their threat is like constantly there. Like even if there was like an enemy that was just, if it was there, it just reduced your maximum sanity by 1, right? So it's like one of those things where it's like the same treacheries, but it's like, I'm going to just ignore this guy. And then suddenly you're like, I can't ignore this guy anymore. I think that's a design for enemies that I just think is stellar. And Whipperwill has been this from Dunwich. I think it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat the design of the Whipperwill, because you just draw the first one, you're like, that's bad, we should solve it. But what if I just move away from it? And suddenly you draw a second Whipperwill, and then the flock appears, and the flavor is just insane. And again, the design is exceptionally clean. Sorry about that. The design is exceptionally clean, and I think he's just a stellar little enemy card. On to our last one here. We have Deep One Bull from the Innsmouth Conspiracy. I know this guy's good because I'm always thinking about him when I'm prepping for Innsmouth. So he goes really high on my threat category. So he's a 4/5/2, humanoid monster Deep One, forced. After he engages you, choose and discard a card from your hand. Forced. After an investigator defeats another Deep One enemy at any location, ready Deep One Bull and move it once towards that investigator's location. This guy, as I mentioned, he's threatening. You're always thinking about how to deal with him. You have ways to tech for him that if you bring to a campaign, it's going to make Innsmouth a lot easier. I really like when enemies have that tech that you can bring that makes them solvable at the sacrifice of maybe not including the cards in your deck that you want to include, but you want to have an easier time with the campaign. He is sticky. He has that forced effect. So yeah, you could just like eat the discard, evade, and leave this guy alone. But as soon as another deep one enemy appears, the deep one bull is back on the table. He doesn't have Hunter, but he kind of has Hunter for deep one bull, for rather deep ones, right? So like you kill the deep one bull is going to get pissed and he's going to like hunt after you. So he has Hunter without actually having Hunter. I think that design is a lot more engaging than just having Hunter on the deep one bull. It's one of those things where you can kind of just solve him for a little bit or potentially maneuver the map in a situation where he'll go a path and you can kind of just kite around him. And I really love that from a gameplay perspective as well, to give that power to the players in order to outsmart the game. Because it's like one of those things where it's like designed to work that way, so it's not like you're actually getting a leg up on the game. It's not like you're actually making the game, like you're not like exploiting the game, you're not actually outsmarting the game, but it feels like you are, right? Because it's like one of those things where it's like by design working that way, and it gives you a lot of like success and power as the player to feel like you're doing a really good job. And I think Deep One Bull is a good example of that kind of thing. Like Hunter enemies in general have it, but with Deep One Bull and proper positioning, you can actually go through with it very well. I think this guy's design, while clean, is not as clean as the other four that we've seen on this list. His text makes sense and it's easy to understand, but it is a little bit wordy, right? Like it's just like it's not as elegant as some of the other cards that we've seen so far in this video, but he is, I think, to me, like the pinnacle of the threat in this one, even more than the Brotherhood cultist, because the Brotherhood cultists don't show up until scenario 3. The Deep One Bull is on scenario 1, and he kind of skirts that line that I talked about earlier, where it's not necessarily like an enemy that you're like, oh, we can't beat this guy when he shows up, but he does have 5 health and 4 attack. For scenario 1, that's a big demand. And like his, otherwise, all the text on his card is also very scary and very punishing. So it's like one of those things where it's like, I think he's just like a very well-designed enemy in multiple different facets and how he works with everything else in his encounter set. But ultimately, just, I love his design in terms of how sticky he is while being a different kind of sticky, and how threatening he is while just kind of having the same sort of tech options that you're able to do with other things like handcuffs, transmogrify. These are some big things that I started bringing. It's just like, I think he's just a very, very well-designed enemy, and he's just one that I always think about. He was the first one I thought for this list. That's why he did get the number 1 slot. But again, these are all just kind of a blob. But Deep One Bull, Whipperwill, Brotherhood cultist, nightgaunt, well, hunting nightgaunt, and the Wizard of the Order are my 5 best designed enemies. Updated list for 2025. If I'm still here in 5 years, we'll do it again, I promise. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments what your best designed enemy is, because I would love to engage with you guys and talk about all of that. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, the GGs.